The sun was just beginning to dip behind the jagged hills of Redstone Ridge, painting the sky with streaks of gold and orange. Dust swirled through the dry air, and the faint sound of hooves echoed across the empty fields. Ethan Calloway, a lone cowboy with a worn hat and a tired horse, rode slowly along the old dirt trail. He had been traveling for days, moving from one small town to the next, searching for work and shelter. Life on the frontier was never easy, and he had learned to rely on nothing but his own courage and skill. As he crested a small rise, Ethan noticed smoke curling into the sky ahead. He urged his horse forward, sensing trouble. When he reached the top, he saw a small wooden homestead surrounded by chaos. The family's barn doors were swinging wildly in the wind, and a group of rough-looking men on horseback had cornered a young girl near the house. Her hair, dark and tangled, flew in the wind as she tried to run. Fear was clear in her eyes, and she cried out for help. Ethan's hand instinctively went to the gun at his side, but he held himself back for a moment. He had faced danger before, but the sight of someone so young in immediate danger stirred something deep inside him. Without a second thought, he nudged his horse into a gallop, charging toward the outlaws. The men, startled by the sudden figure appearing from the hills, shouted and tried to scatter. One of the outlaws swung a rope toward the girl, but Ethan was quicker. He fired a warning shot into the ground, the sharp crack echoing across the valley. The men froze, unsure if this lone cowboy was crazy enough to face them all. Ethan's eyes were steady, his voice firm. "Back away, or you'll regret it," he shouted. His confidence seemed to grow as he stood tall on his horse, and the youngest girl, sensing hope, ran toward him. The outlaws hesitated. They were used to easy prey, not someone who faced danger without fear. Ethan pushed his horse closer, and with a few well-aimed shots, he forced them to retreat. They mounted their horses and disappeared into the hills, leaving only dust and the echo of their horses' hooves behind. The girl, trembling but safe, ran up to Ethan. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I thought they would get me." Her small hands clutched at his coat, and Ethan felt a pang of responsibility. "You're safe now," he said gently. "No one will hurt you anymore." He dismounted, careful not to frighten her further, and took her hand. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the yard. The homestead was quiet now, but the tension in the air lingered. Ethan could see the damage the outlaws had done: broken fence posts, a toppled cart, and a barn door hanging by a single hinge. From the house, a figure appeared, a woman middle-aged, with lines of worry etched across her face. "Leela," she called, relief flooding her voice. The girl ran into her mother's arms, sobbing. Ethan stepped back, giving them space, but the woman's eyes found his. There was a mixture of gratitude and something else, respect perhaps, for the man who had risked his life to save her child. I don't know how to thank you," the woman said. "You saved her." Ethan shrugged, trying to appear modest, but he knew the truth. Saving someone's life was not something to be taken lightly. "It was the right thing to do," he said. "No one should have to face danger like that alone." As the family began to gather around the yard, Ethan noticed 3 other girls, older than the one he had saved, watching from a distance. They looked wary, curious, and perhaps a little skeptical of this stranger who had ridden into their home and driven away danger. Ethan smiled faintly, tipping his hat. "Evening," he said. It was a small gesture, but it seemed to ease some of the tension. The father of the girls appeared then, a tall man with broad shoulders and a stern expression. His eyes were sharp, and he studied Ethan carefully. "You saved my youngest," he said slowly, almost as if weighing every word. "That is no small thing in these parts. You understand what that means?" Ethan frowned. "I saved her from outlaws, that's all." The man shook his head. "Out here, actions carry weight. There are old laws, laws of honor and duty. The one who saves a girl, especially the youngest of a family, carries responsibility. It is not just thanks, it is a bond." Ethan's heart sank a little. He had heard of such traditions before, tales of the frontier where deeds created obligations. But he had never faced it himself, and he had certainly not expected to be part of one today. He looked at the young girl, Leela, who now hid shyly behind her mother. Her wide eyes seemed to ask something he wasn't ready to answer. The father continued, his voice firm but not unkind. "You saved her life. By the law of this land, you are bound to her family. You must honor that bond. It is the way of Redstone Ridge." Ethan swallowed hard. He had faced many dangers and many difficult situations, but this was something entirely different. He felt a strange mix of pride, fear, and confusion. Saving a life had been simple in his mind, do the right thing, no matter the risk. But now that act carried consequences he could not ignore. Leela stepped forward slightly, her small hand reaching for Ethan's again. Are you going to stay?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain. Her question was innocent, but it made Ethan think. He had not expected to stay. He had planned to move on, to continue his wandering life. But he could not leave her, not after what had just happened. Ethan looked around the yard, taking in the homestead, the broken fence, and the four sisters standing close together. The weight of the situation pressed on him, but he also felt something else, a strange sense of purpose. He could not turn his back on those in need, not now. I'll stay for a while," he said finally, his voice low but steady. "I'll make sure she's safe." The father nodded, a hint of relief in his eyes. "Good, that is all we ask for now. But remember, this is just the beginning. Actions have consequences here. You have entered a life with many responsibilities, Ethan Calloway." Ethan nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure what lay ahead. For now, he helped repair the barn door, fetched water from the well, and made sure Leela was calm. As the night fell over Redstone Ridge, lanterns flickered in the windows of the homestead. The stars shone brightly above the hills, and Ethan felt a mix of exhaustion and resolve. He had saved a life, yes, but he also realized that life on the frontier was not just about survival. It was about honor, duty, and the ties that bound people together. He could see it in Leela's eyes, in her family's cautious but trusting gaze. Something had changed that evening, something that would shape the days, weeks, and perhaps years to come. Ethan knew that the road ahead would not be easy. The law of the land, the old customs, and the family's expectations would challenge him in ways he had never imagined. But for now, he had done the right thing, and that was enough. And as he stood in the warm glow of the homestead, hearing the soft voices of the family settling down for the night, Ethan made a silent promise to himself. He would protect them, no matter what came next. See, the next morning, the sun rose over Redstone Ridge in a soft wash of pink and gold. Ethan awoke to the sound of birds chirping and the faint clatter of dishes from the homestead's kitchen. He rubbed his eyes, stretched, and realized that he was still sleeping in the barn loft. The events of the previous evening, the rescue, the chaos, and the father's solemn warning played over and over in his mind. He had expected to ride away at dawn, but now staying was not just a choice. It felt like a responsibility, heavy and inescapable. Ethan dressed quickly and climbed down from the loft. Outside, the youngest girl, Leela, ran barefoot through the yard, her hair bouncing in the morning light. She waved at him shyly, and he smiled. She had not yet spoken much since the attack, but her eyes held a quiet trust, a silent thank you that no words could fully express. Inside the house, the other sisters were gathered around the kitchen table. Clara, the eldest, sat with a careful posture, her face showing both curiosity and caution. Me, fiery and independent, leaned against the wall, arms crossed, giving Ethan a look that seemed to say she was ready to challenge anything he did. Rose, gentle and thoughtful, quietly arranged the breakfast plates, her eyes flicking toward Ethan with a mix of interest and shyness. The father, Mr. Harland, stood at the stove, flipping a pan with practiced skill. He did not greet Ethan with warmth or friendliness, but his nod carried a weight of acknowledgement. "You've spent the night here," he said, his voice calm but serious. "Good. You should know what it means to live in our house. The law of the land is not just words. It is respect, honor, and duty. You saved Leela, and that carries a bond. You must honor that bond with the family." Ethan nodded slowly. "I understand," he said. "I will do what I can to help." The sisters exchanged glances. Leela hid behind her mother for a moment, peeking out cautiously. Clara spoke first, her voice steady. "You realize this is not just about saving one person, right? Our father follows the old ways strictly. You are now tied to all of us in a way you may not yet understand." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I am aware. I did not expect this, but I will respect your father's wishes. I just need to understand what that means." Me scoffed slightly. "Understand? You barely know us." "How can you possibly know what it means?" Her tone was sharp, but there was no malice, only skepticism. Rose looked at Ethan quietly. "It's not just about the law," she said softly. "It's about trust. You risked your life to save Leela. That shows something about you." Ethan felt a strange warmth at her words. In a world that was often harsh and unforgiving, trust was rare. To have someone believe in him simply because he had acted honorably, It was both humbling and frightening. Over the next few days, Ethan tried to settle into life at the homestead. He helped repair the barn, mend broken fences, and care for the small herd of cattle. Each task brought him closer to the sisters in small ways. Leela clung to him during chores, asking endless questions about the land and the animals. Clara observed silently, occasionally offering advice or correcting his methods. Me challenged him constantly, testing his patience and skill. Rose, ever quiet and kind, offered help with simple tasks, guiding him gently when he struggled. Evening after evening, the sisters gathered around the hearth. Ethan would sit and share stories from his travels, stories of faraway towns, storms he had faced, and people he had met. Slowly, laughter began to fill the home. Me's teasing became less sharp, Clara's caution softened, and Leela's shyness melted into playful curiosity. Rose remained gentle, her presence a quiet anchor in the household. One afternoon, as Ethan helped with the harvest, he noticed the weight of the family's expectations pressing down on him. He could see it in the father's watchful eyes, the sisters' cautious glances, and even in the way Leela hesitated when she followed him in the fields. The law that bound him to this family was clear, and yet it was complicated. He had acted out of instinct, out of a sense of duty to save a life. Now that same act required him to navigate the emotions, fears, and hopes of 4 women he barely knew. That evening, after a long day of work, the family gathered for supper. Ethan sat quietly, listening to the sisters talk about their plans for the coming week. Clara spoke of repairing the fence along the northern field. Me wanted to plant more vegetables near the creek. Rose offered to help with the chickens, and Leela simply listened, her small hands fidgeting with her napkin. After supper, Mr. Harland addressed Ethan once more. "You are part of this family now, whether you like it or not. The law does not bend for convenience or preference. You must learn to respect it, and in time you may come to understand it. Your actions affect more than yourself." Ethan nodded, though he felt the weight of the words. He had never imagined life like this, where a single act of bravery would tie him so closely to a family he barely knew. And yet, as he looked around the table, he could see the strength, resilience, and loyalty of these women. It was a family worth respecting and protecting. In the days that followed, Ethan's presence became a constant in the homestead. He rose before dawn to tend to the horses and help with chores. He learned the sisters' habits, their small fears, and their ways of laughing. Leela's laughter was bright and contagious, Clara's patience deep and steady, Me's fire tempered by quiet care, and Rose's gentleness a soothing presence in the home. One evening, after a long day, Ethan found himself sitting by the hearth with the youngest girl, Leela. She rested her head against his shoulder, exhausted but content. "Do you think we'll be safe now?" she asked softly. Ethan smiled gently. "Yes, I promise no harm will come to you, not while I'm here." Her small hand squeezed his. "Thank you, Ethan. I feel safe with you." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that surprised him. He had saved her life once, but now he realized that keeping her safe was a far greater challenge. It was not just about fighting outlaws or mending fences. It was about earning trust, earning respect, and caring for a family in a way he had never imagined. As the night settled over Redstone Ridge, Ethan stood outside the homestead looking up at the stars. The law that bound him to this family was real, undeniable, and unyielding. Yet he felt a strange sense of calm. The road ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in a long while, he felt that he had a place where he belonged. In the distance, the hills of the frontier stretched endlessly, wild and untamed. Ethan knew that dangers would come, that the world outside the homestead was harsh and unpredictable. But for now, inside these walls, he had found purpose. He had found trust, respect, and the beginnings of connection with 4 remarkable sisters. And as he returned to the warm light of the homestead, the smell of firewood and fresh bread filling the air, Ethan realized that this was only the beginning. The law had brought him here, but it was the bonds he was forming that would truly define the days to come. Days turned into weeks at the homestead, and Ethan began to settle into the rhythm of life in Redstone Ridge. Each morning brought new chores, feeding the horses, tending to the small herd of cattle, and helping with repairs around the house. At first, the work was exhausting. His muscles ached, and the sun burned his skin, but he felt a quiet satisfaction in being useful. More importantly, he saw the sisters live up close, their routines, their strengths, and their small joys. Leela was still the most attached to him, following him everywhere he went. She asked endless questions about everything, the horses, the plants, even about the stars at night. Ethan answered patiently, though sometimes he had to admit he didn't know the answer. Clara, the eldest, observed quietly. She sometimes offered advice or corrected his work, and though she rarely smiled, Ethan could sense her growing trust. Me was a different matter entirely. She challenged him constantly, sometimes harshly. When he tried to help her with the vegetables near the creek, she would glare at him. "You're doing it wrong," she said, crossing her arms. "The soil needs to be turned this way, not that way." Ethan smiled patiently. "I'm learning, me, teach me, and I'll follow." She narrowed her eyes, clearly debating whether to accept his humility. Finally, she said, "Fine, but don't mess it up." Rose, gentle and quiet, often followed the work silently, helping without saying much. But her kindness was clear in the small gestures, handing him tools, arranging the baskets of harvested vegetables, or simply sharing a comforting smile when he felt frustrated. Her calm presence made the hard work feel lighter. Evening conversations became a new rhythm. Around the hearth, they shared stories of the day, small successes and occasional failures. Ethan told stories from his travels, tales of storms, of faraway towns, and of people he had met. Leela listened with wide-eyed fascination, occasionally asking questions that made him laugh. Clara sometimes added her own stories from the homestead, recounting lessons learned from their father. Me listened mostly in silence, but occasionally her sharp humor would bring a laugh from everyone. Rose's quiet observations often softened tense moments, reminding Ethan of the importance of patience and care. Despite the growing warmth in the household, Ethan could not ignore the weight of the law that had brought him here. He was bound to this family, tied to 4 sisters in ways he was still learning to understand. It was not a simple obligation. It was a responsibility that touched every part of their lives. Every decision he made, every action affected not just Leela but all 4 sisters. One afternoon, while repairing a section of the fence along the northern field, Ethan noticed the tension in Me's expression. She was working beside him, moving piles of stones to reinforce the wooden posts. Her movements were precise but sharp, and he could feel the frustration she tried to hide. "You're too careful," she said abruptly, her voice cutting through the quiet. "This fence won't hold if you keep poking at every post like that." Ethan paused, wiping sweat from his brow. "I just want to make sure it's strong. We can't have it falling over in the wind." Me glared, clearly not satisfied with the answer. "Strong, that's obvious, but you worry too much about little things. You need to trust yourself more." He smiled faintly. "Maybe you're right." "I'll try." The moment passed, but the tension lingered. Ethan realized that gaining trust and acceptance from me would take more than patience. It would take consistent action and proving himself in ways that words alone could not. That evening, a new challenge arrived. A group of travelers passed near the homestead, seeking shelter from the approaching storm. They were tired and hungry, and Ethan insisted they be given food and a place to stay for the night. The sisters were hesitant, but the father allowed it, trusting Ethan's judgment. The storm arrived with sudden force, lightning flashing across the sky and rain drumming on the roof. Ethan worked tirelessly to ensure everyone was safe, moving supplies, helping the sisters secure windows, and calming Leela when she became frightened. The sisters watched him closely, seeing his dedication not just in words but in action. After the storm passed, the travelers left, grateful for the family's hospitality. Me's expression softened slightly. "You handled that well," she admitted quietly. Clara nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. Even Rose's gentle smile carried approval. And Leela simply hugged Ethan tightly, her small arms around his waist, whispering, "You kept us safe." Over time, Ethan began to understand the complexities of this new life. It was not just the physical work, though that was hard enough. It was the emotions, the trust, and the bonds that needed constant care. Every interaction mattered. Every choice could either build connection or create distance. And through it all, he could feel the sisters' opinions of him shifting slowly, from wary curiosity to cautious respect, and perhaps, in some small ways, affection. One afternoon, while tending the chickens with Rose, Ethan realized just how far they had all come. She moved beside him quietly, her hands deftly gathering eggs and arranging them in the basket. "You've done a lot for us already," she said softly, her voice almost shy. Ethan looked at her, surprised by the gentle praise. "I'm just trying to help," he said, Rose smiled faintly. It shows people notice actions more than words. It struck him then how true that was. His life on the frontier had always been about action, quick thinking, courage, survival. But here he saw that actions had another meaning. They could build trust, heal fear, and create bonds that were stronger than any law or obligation. Leela came running toward them, her small hands holding a bouquet of wildflowers she had picked from the field. "For you, Ethan," she exclaimed, holding them out proudly. Ethan took the flowers, smiling at her bright, joyful eyes. "Thank you, Leela, they're beautiful." Clara and me watched from the porch, a small exchange of glances passing between them. Clara's sternness softened, and Me's fiery expression carried a hint of approval. Even the father, standing silently in the shadows of the porch, gave a small nod. Despite these small victories, Ethan could feel the growing weight of the responsibilities that lay ahead. The law had brought him here, yes, but it was the relationships, the trust, and the lives of the sisters that truly mattered now. He knew he could not act selfishly or casually. Every decision he made would affect them, and he had to be ready for the challenges yet to come. As the weeks passed, Ethan began to realize something unexpected. What had begun as duty, a binding of obligation, was slowly transforming. He found himself caring deeply for each sister in unique ways. Leela's innocent curiosity, Clara's steady wisdom, Me's fiery determination, and Rose's gentle kindness each touched him differently. And while the law had brought him here, it was the growing connections, built through shared work and shared life, that began to anchor him. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped low over Redstone Ridge, Ethan sat on the porch steps, looking out over the fields. Leela lay asleep nearby, exhausted from the day's chores. The other sisters were inside, preparing supper. The house was quiet, save for the soft murmur of the wind through the trees. Ethan's mind wandered to the future, what challenges would come, what dangers might appear, and how he could honor the bonds he now carried. But for the first time since the rescue, he felt a sense of calm. He had chosen in his own way to accept the responsibilities placed upon him. He was learning the law of the land, yes, but he was also learning something more important. The law was not just about rules. It was about care, respect, and the strength of human connections. And as the night settled over the homestead, Ethan felt something he had not felt in a long time, a sense of belonging. He was part of this family now, and while the road ahead would not be easy, he knew that he would face it with courage, patience, and honor. Weeks passed peacefully at the homestead, and Ethan had grown used to the rhythm of life in Redstone Ridge. He had learned the sisters' habits, the daily chores, and even the small routines that made the household run smoothly. But peace on the frontier was always fragile. One evening, as the sun sank behind the distant hills, Ethan noticed a group of dust clouds rising in the distance. At first, he thought they were travelers, but something about the movement felt wrong, too quick, too purposeful. Ethan's instincts sharpened immediately. He dropped the basket of vegetables he had been carrying and squinted toward the horizon. The dust clouds were growing larger, moving closer to the homestead. A cold tension ran down his spine. "Something's coming," he muttered to himself. He could feel the familiar surge of responsibility, this time not just for one sister, but for all four. He ran toward the house, calling out as he went. "Everyone inside, now!" The sisters reacted quickly. Leela, small and scared, ran toward him and he scooped her up in his arms. Clara grabbed a lantern and moved to the doors to secure them. Me ran to the windows to block the shutters, her face set in a determined scowl. Rose calmly helped the younger girls to safety, guiding them with quiet authority. Through the growing dusk, Ethan could see the figures on horseback approaching. Outlaws, rough, armed, and clearly intent on causing trouble. He had guessed correctly. These were men from the gang that had attacked Leela weeks ago, seeking revenge for their previous defeat. His jaw tightened. The peace they had fought to build was now under threat. Ethan moved swiftly, positioning himself at the front of the homestead. "Stay inside," he shouted. "Do not come out no matter what." The outlaws circled the house, shouting taunts and trying to intimidate the family. One of them fired a shot toward the barn, splintering the wood near the door. Leela whimpered behind him, clutching his coat. He tightened his grip on her, his mind racing. He had faced danger before, yes, but this time it was not just about him. It was about all four sisters. Clara, standing beside him, whispered, "We can't let them take anything. We have to hold them off." Ethan nodded. "I know. We'll protect this place. No one will get hurt while I'm here." The first wave of outlaws tried to break through the front gate, but Ethan was ready. He fired warning shots, careful to avoid hitting anyone inside. The outlaws hesitated, giving him a moment to plan. He realized that brute force alone would not save them. They needed strategy, speed, and courage. He motioned for Clara and me to help. Clara fetched barrels and crates from the barn, stacking them to create a barrier. Me reinforced the doors and windows, using her strength to secure them against the impact of the outlaws' attacks. Rose moved quietly among them, handing tools and lanterns where needed, her calm presence keeping everyone focused. Leela, small and frightened, stayed close to Ethan, drawing courage from his steady presence. The outlaws tried again, this time breaking down part of the fence and moving closer to the house. Ethan's heart pounded, but he did not hesitate. He grabbed a rope, tying it across the entrance to slow them down. When one of the men attempted to break through, he swung a heavy branch, forcing the man to retreat. The battle was tense but measured, each action calculated to keep the sisters safe while keeping the outlaws at bay. Hours seemed to pass like minutes. The sky darkened completely, and the wind carried the sound of horses' hooves and shouting across the ridge. Ethan's arms ached from holding his ground, but he could not falter. He thought of Leela, her small hands trusting him completely, and of her sisters, each relying on him in her own way. He could not let them down. Finally, as if sensing they had underestimated the family, the outlaws began to retreat, riding back into the hills with angry shouts. Ethan lowered his arm, breathing heavily. The homestead was battered, fences broken, a few windows splintered, but everyone inside was safe. He set Leela down gently, kneeling to meet her eyes. "It's over," he said softly. "You're safe now." Leela clung to him, her relief evident in her tear-streaked face. "Thank you," she whispered. Clara stepped forward, her usual stern expression softened. "You did more than save us. You kept us together and alive. That takes courage, Ethan." Me, who had been frowning and tense throughout the fight, finally allowed a small smile. "I'll admit it, you were impressive. I didn't think anyone could handle them the way you did." Rose quietly nodded in agreement. "You protected all of us. That means more than you realize." Ethan looked at them, feeling a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and something more profound. This was no longer about law or obligation alone. This was about trust, respect, and connection. He realized that the bonds formed through shared hardship were stronger than anything else, stronger even than the law that had brought him here. In the days that followed, the sisters treated him differently. Leela's attachment grew deeper, but in a way that was joyful rather than fearful. Clara began to include him in decisions about the homestead, valuing his opinion and insight. Me challenged him less aggressively, but with more respect, testing him not to provoke but to grow stronger together. Rose remained gentle and supportive, her quiet smiles a constant reminder that trust was mutual. Ethan understood more than ever that this was what it meant to belong somewhere, to a family, to a place, to people who depended on him and whom he depended on in return. The sacred law had brought him here, but the experiences, the challenges, and the care they shared had made it real, made it meaningful. One evening, after the homestead had been repaired and the fences rebuilt, Ethan sat outside on the porch, watching the sun set over the hills. Leela came to sit beside him, holding a small basket of wildflowers she had picked. "I'm glad you stayed," she said softly. Ethan smiled down at her. "So am I, Leela, so am I." Clara, me, and Rose joined them quietly, and for a moment the four sisters and Ethan sat together in silence, watching the sky turn shades of purple and pink. There was a sense of peace, fragile but real, resting over the homestead. Ethan knew more challenges would come. Life on the frontier was never easy, and danger could appear at any moment. But he also knew that, together, they could face anything. He had begun to understand the true meaning of the law, the responsibility to protect, the duty to care, and the bond formed through courage and action. For the first time, he felt that this home, this family, and this land were truly his. The law had brought him here, yes, but it was the love, trust, and respect that had made him stay. And as the stars began to appear in the clear night sky, Ethan silently promised himself that he would protect them, guide them, and honor the bonds they shared, no matter what lay ahead. The storm of the outlaws had passed, but the experience had changed everything. It had deepened the sisters' trust, strengthened Ethan's sense of duty, and created a connection that went beyond law. From that day forward, they were more than just a family by tradition. They were a family by choice, courage, and love. The weeks after the outlaws' attack were quieter, but the homestead never returned to complete calm. Life on the frontier demanded constant vigilance. Ethan had become a permanent presence in the Harland household, not just because the law had bound him to the family, but because he had chosen to stay. Every day brought small victories and lessons, and the bond between him and the sisters grew stronger with each passing moment. The family worked together to restore the homestead. Broken fences were rebuilt, crops tended, and the barn repaired. Leela's laughter echoed through the yard, a joyful sound that lifted everyone's spirits. Clara oversaw the work with careful precision, ensuring that nothing was overlooked. Me challenged Ethan daily, testing his skills and patience, but with a subtle smile that revealed her growing respect for him. Rose quietly supported everyone, her gentle guidance smoothing tensions and keeping the household steady. One crisp morning, Ethan rose before dawn. He mounted his horse and rode to the nearby ridge, surveying the surrounding lands. His mind wandered to the journey that had brought him here, the rescue of Leela, the sacred law that tied him to the sisters, and the trials that had tested their courage. The weight of responsibility he had first felt had transformed into something far deeper: care, respect, and even love. When he returned, the sisters were already working in the fields. Leela waved, her small hand glinting in the morning sun. Ethan dismounted and joined them, helping to gather the morning harvest. The work was hard, but the effort was shared, and the sense of family strengthened with each task completed together. That evening, the family gathered around the hearth. Ethan shared stories from his travels, tales of distant towns, and memories of past hardships. Leela giggled at the stories, while Clara, me, and Rose listened intently, offering insights, teasing him gently, or sharing quiet reflections. Even Mr. Harland, the father, allowed himself a small smile, recognizing that the presence of Ethan had brought stability and protection to the family beyond what words could express. As the night deepened, the conversation turned serious. Ethan cleared his throat, looking at each sister in turn. "I know the law brought me here," he said quietly, "but staying is my choice. I care for all of you, and I want to honor that in every way I can. This isn't about obligation anymore, it's about respect, trust, and, well, love." Leela's eyes widened and she pressed her small hands together. "We care about you too, Ethan," she whispered. Clara's expression softened, her usual reserve giving way to warmth. "We see what you've done for us. You've kept us safe and you've worked alongside us. That means more than any law." Me's usual fiery glare melted into something gentler, a small smile tugging at her lips. "You've earned our respect," she admitted. "I didn't think anyone could handle this family the way you have, but you have." Rose, ever gentle, reached out and placed her hand on Ethan's arm. "It's more than respect. It's trust and it's comfort. You've become part of our lives, and that is something I cherish." Ethan's chest tightened with emotion. The law had bound him to them, yes, but it was the experiences, the care, and the bonds they had built together that made him truly a part of the family. He realized that love was not something forced. It was something nurtured, earned, and shared through action, patience, and understanding. Over the next few months, life on the homestead settled into a steady, fulfilling rhythm. Ethan continued to help with chores, protect the property, and guide the sisters when needed. But now, there was laughter, warmth, and genuine affection in every corner of the house. Leela no longer clung to him out of fear, but followed him with joy, eager to share small adventures in the fields. Clara included him in her careful plans, seeking his advice on repairs and management. Me challenged him, but with teasing smiles and subtle encouragement. Rose remained the gentle heart of the home, her quiet guidance ensuring harmony in all they did. One late afternoon, a messenger arrived at the homestead. He carried a note from a neighboring ranch, warning of a small group of outlaws seen in the hills nearby. The message brought a shadow of worry, but Ethan's presence reassured the family. "We've handled them before," he said firmly. "We'll do it again if we must, but for now we focus on what we can protect here. Together we are stronger." The sisters nodded, each in her own way. They had come to trust Ethan completely, not just as a protector, but as a partner in the daily life of the homestead. The fear that had first brought him to the family had transformed into confidence and security, and the sacred law that had dictated his actions now existed alongside genuine care and affection. As the sun set, Ethan and the sisters worked together to gather the last of the harvest. The sky blazed in orange and pink, casting long shadows over the fields. Leela ran ahead, giggling, while Clara, me, and Rose worked steadily by his side. Ethan paused for a moment, taking in the scene. This was his home now, not just a house or a piece of land, but a family that had welcomed him, challenged him, and grown to depend on him. That night, as they sat around the hearth, Ethan spoke again. "I know that life out here is not easy. The law brought me here and duty kept me. But I stay because I want to. You are my family, and I will do everything I can to protect and honor that." The sisters looked at him, their expressions a mixture of gratitude, respect, and warmth. Leela leaned against him, smiling softly. "We feel the same way, Ethan. You are part of our lives now in every way." Clara reached over and placed her hand on his shoulder. "We see your heart in everything you do. That is what makes you part of this family." Me's teasing smile returned, but gentler this time. "I'll admit it, you've earned more than respect. You've earned a place here." Rose simply nodded, her quiet smile filled with sincerity. "And we are glad you are here, Ethan, truly glad." Ethan's heart swelled with emotion. The journey that had begun with a single act of courage, saving Leela, had grown into something far greater. The sacred law had brought him here, yes, but it was the trust, love, and bonds formed through hardship and shared life that had made him stay. In the weeks that followed, Ethan and the sisters continued their life together. They faced challenges, worked hard, and grew closer each day. The homestead became a place of laughter, learning, and care. They hunted together, repaired fences, tended crops, and shared evenings by the hearth. Each moment strengthened the family, each day a reminder that life on the frontier, though hard, could be full of warmth and connection. One evening, as the stars appeared over Redstone Ridge, Ethan sat on the porch with all four sisters. Leela nestled against him, Clara leaned beside him, me teasing gently about a minor mistake he had made earlier, and Rose quietly held his hand. The sky stretched endlessly above them, a canvas of stars and possibility. Ethan looked at the sisters, each unique and wonderful in her own way, and realized that the sacred law had done more than bind him. It had led him to a family he loved and who loved him in return. This was no longer obligation or duty, it was choice, connection, and care. He took a deep breath, the cool night air filling his lungs. "I promise," he said quietly, "I will always protect you, care for you, and honor the bonds we share. Not because I must, but because I want to." The sisters smiled, and for the first time, all four spoke together. "We trust you, Ethan. We care for you. You are family." A gentle wind rustled through the trees, and the stars shone brighter, reflecting the peace, trust, and love that had grown at the homestead. Life on the frontier would always be challenging, but now Ethan knew he had a home, a family, and a place where he truly belonged. The journey that began with courage, law, and obligation had transformed into one of love, respect, and shared life. And as Ethan looked at the sisters, he felt something he had never felt before, a certainty that together they could face any challenge the frontier might bring. In that moment, under the endless sky of Redstone Ridge, the family of four sisters and their brave protector knew that the bonds they had forged were stronger than any law, tougher than any storm, and brighter than any star above. They had found each other, not by chance alone, but through courage, care, and the quiet power of trust and love. And as the night settled softly over the homestead, laughter and warmth filled the home, a promise of many peaceful days and shared moments to come. Ethan had kept his promise, the sisters had accepted his heart, and together they were ready for whatever the frontier could bring.